The smell of panic is sour. You can taste it on your tongue. But the third room at the end of the hall, that was different. The dust hung in the air, frozen in the beams of light. Like the room was holding its breath. It becomes white noise, background static. The loudest part is the silence that comes after. It's a specific kind of silence. It's heavy. It presses against your ears like water. It has a texture. It feels thick, like the air itself has suddenly turned to lead, and you are the only thing moving through it. That silence is where the truth lives. That silence is where the ghosts start to speak. We were clearing a compound. It wasn't anything high value, not really. Just another grid coordinate on a map that someone back in a climate-controlled office decided was important for 48 hours. We had moved through it fast. Efficiency is the only way to survive. You don't look left or right. You don't wonder about the architecture or who built the walls. You check corners. You clear sectors. You keep moving because stagnation is death. When the dust settled, the adrenaline started to drain out of my legs. That's the feeling nobody talks about enough. The crash. 1 minute you are a machine, dialed in, senses sharpened to a razor's edge. The next, you are just a guy in dirty clothes, carrying too much weight, standing in a room that isn't yours. My squad had moved outside to set up a perimeter. I volunteered to sweep the back rooms. Intel gathering. That's what we called it. It sounds professional. It sounds clean. It implies that you're looking for maps, or hard drives, or plans, strategic assets. But mostly you're just walking through the wreckage of someone else's life, making sure nobody is hiding in a closet waiting to take you out. I walked down a hallway. The lights were out, obviously. The sunlight cut through the dust in sharp angled beams. I remember the dust. It was suspended in the air, swirling in the turbulence my movement created. Every step I took kicked up a fine gray powder that tasted like old stone and copper. The air was stale. It tasted used. I checked the first 2 rooms. Empty. Debris on the floor. A mattress overturned. The usual chaos of a hasty exit. There's a smell to places that have been abandoned in fear. It's sour. It's the smell of panic left behind to rot. Then I got to the 3rd room. It was at the end of the hall. The door was already ajar, hanging off the top hinge. I pushed it open with the barrel of my rifle, stepping to the side, waiting for a reaction. Nothing. Just the silence. I stepped inside. This room was different. It wasn't tossed like the others. It felt purposeful. There was a desk, a chair pushed neatly under it, a cot in the corner, the blanket folded tight, military tight. I lowered my weapon. The threat was gone. Now it was just me in the quiet. Standing there, I felt a strange sense of intrusion. Not the tactical kind. We were soldiers. We intruded on everything. We kicked down doors and broke windows. That was the job. But this felt personal. It felt like walking into someone's bedroom while they were at work. The air felt colder here. My eyes scanned the room. No tech, no maps on the walls, just bare concrete and shadows. I moved to the desk first. The wood was warped from the heat. I pulled the drawer open. It screeched against the frame, a high, dry sound that made me grit my teeth. Empty. Just a single paperclip and a layer of sand. I checked under the cot. Nothing but dust bunnies and a lost button. Every empty space dialed up the tension. My skin felt prickled. It was too clean. It felt like the room was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a mistake. And then, in the corner, standing against the far wall, was a locker. It was a standard-issue metal locker. Gray paint, chipping at the corners, dented on the side. It looked like it had been dragged from one base to another, surviving a dozen deployments just like ours. It looked exactly like the one I had back at my bunk. Exactly. That stopped me. That stopped me. It wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. That gray metal box. It was identical to the one I had back at the fob. Same cheap padlock hasp. Same dent on the left side. My hand started sweating inside my glove. I knew I shouldn't touch it. It felt illegal, like I was breaking a rule that wasn't written down anywhere. I knew what was in my locker back at the fob. I knew exactly how it smelled. I knew the order of the photos taped to the inside of the door. I knew where I hid my letters. I stared at the enemy's locker, and for a second I wasn't an American soldier in a foreign land. I was just a man looking at another man's sanctuary. My boots felt heavy on the floor as I walked toward it. The sound of my footsteps echoed, sharp and lonely. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I stopped in front of it. It was about eye level. There was no lock on it. A padlock hasp hung open, empty. He must have left in a hurry. Or maybe he just didn't think he needed to lock it anymore. Maybe he knew he wasn't coming back. My hand reached out. I hesitated. Why was I hesitating? I had searched hundreds of rooms. I had patted down bodies. I had dug through trash piles looking for intel. I had done things that would make my grandmother weep. Why was I afraid to open a metal door? It was the silence. The silence was judging me. I could hear my own breathing. Shallow. Controlled. But underneath the discipline, my heart was hammering against my ribs. It felt like a drum beating a warning. Don't do it. Walk away. Leave it closed. If I left it closed, he remained a ghost. He remained a hostile. A faceless shape in the distance that fired at us. A statistic. If I opened it, I risked finding something else. The metal was cold under my fingertips. I gripped the handle. It was gritty with dust. I took a breath, held it, and pulled. The hinges screamed. A high-pitched squeal of rusted metal that tore through the quiet like a gunshot. It made me flinch. I expected someone to burst in, to yell at me. But nobody came. The dust motes just danced in the shaft of light. I pulled the door all the way open. The shadow inside the locker was deep. It took a second for my eyes to adjust to the gloom within the metal box. I smelled it before I saw anything. Old fabric, tobacco, and something sweet, like cheap soap. The smell hit me harder than a physical blow. It was the smell of a living person. It wasn't the smell of an enemy. It was the smell of a guy. Just a guy. I leaned in. My chest felt tight. I felt like I was shrinking. The armor I wore, the Kevlar, the ceramic plates, they suddenly felt incredibly heavy, crushing. I looked at the top shelf first. There was a folded uniform. Not the combat fatigues, but a dress shirt. Ironed. Creased. Someone had taken the time to fold it perfectly. It sat there waiting for a parade that was never going to happen. Beside it, a small book. The cover was worn, the gold lettering faded. I didn't know the language, but I knew what a prayer book looked like. The pages were dog-eared, used, held. I reached out and touched the fabric of the shirt. It was rough wool, scratchy, just intel. I whispered to myself. My voice sounded foreign in the room, just checking for intel. But I was lying. I wasn't looking for intel anymore. I pushed the folded uniform aside. Something rattled on the metal shelf. A cassette tape. Clear plastic case, cracked down the middle. I squinted at the handwritten label. Creedence. My chest tightened. I listened to Creedence. My dad listened to Creedence. Why the hell did the monster have a bootleg copy of Fortunate Son hidden in his locker? I turned the cracked plastic case over in my hands. It felt greasy. Flashbacks hit me. I remembered the 4th of July back in Texas. My dad flipping burgers in the backyard, smoke in his eyes, singing along to that exact track. Badly. Off-key. But happy. That song was the soundtrack of my freedom. It was the sound of American summer. How did it end up here? In the pocket of a guy I was supposed to erase? It felt like a glitch in the Matrix. A violation of the rules of war. It didn't fit. The hate started to crack. I didn't want it to, but it did. Hanging from a hook was a set of civilian clothes. A flannel shirt. Jeans. They looked small. Smaller than I expected. He wasn't a giant. He wasn't a monster. He was just a size medium. And then, I looked at the inside of the door. That's where we keep the things that matter. That's the altar, that's the sacred space. I saw the tape first. Strips of yellowing Scotch tape, holding up a collage of paper. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't look away. I wanted to close the door. I wanted to slam it shut and run back to the squad, back to the noise, back to the safety of the perimeter where everything was black and white. But I was frozen. I leaned closer, my face inches from the metal door. The photos were arranged in a circle. In the center, there was a drawing. A child's drawing. You know the kind. Crayons pressed too hard into the paper. Stick figures with giant heads and smiles that take up half the face. A yellow sun in the corner with lines radiating out. It was taped right at eye level, so it would be the first thing he saw when he opened it in the morning, and the last thing he saw before he geared up for a patrol. I looked at the drawing, and then my eyes drifted to the photograph next to it. It was a Polaroid. Small. Square. The colors were slightly faded. leaning toward that nostalgic yellow that old photos get when they've been touched too many times. It showed a woman. She was young. She had dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, the kind you tie up when you're busy doing housework or playing with a kid. She wasn't looking at the camera, she was looking at the man holding the camera, and she was laughing. Not a posed smile, not a formal portrait. It was a real laugh. Her head was thrown back a little, her hand up as if to stop him from taking the picture, but her eyes were full of absolute adoration, and next to her, holding her leg, was the boy, the artist, the one who drew the stick figures with the giant heads. He was looking right at the lens, eyes wide, holding a plastic toy truck. My knees hit the floor. I didn't decide to kneel. My legs just gave up. The strength that had carried me through 12 hours of patrol, through the heat, through the weight of the gear, it just evaporated. I sat there on the cold concrete of an enemy combatant's room, staring at a picture of a wife and a son who were waiting for him to come home. And the terrifying thing wasn't that they looked different. It was that they looked exactly like my wife, like my son. The locker blurred. My throat closed up. It felt like I had swallowed broken glass. See, they train us to fight monsters. They tell us we are fighting an ideology, a threat to freedom, a faceless evil. And maybe, on the big map, in the strategy rooms, that's true. Maybe the politics make sense up there. But down here, in the dirt, in the silence, there are no monsters. There are just men. Men who are scared. Men who miss their beds. Men who tape pictures of their wives to the inside of a metal door because that single square inch of paper is the only thing keeping them sane when the mortars start falling. I looked at his folded shirt again. I looked at the prayer book. I realized that 5 minutes ago, if he had walked through that door, I would have put 2 rounds in his chest. I wouldn't have hesitated. It was him or me. That's the rule. But looking at that photo, I realized that if I killed him, I wasn't just killing a soldier. I was killing the laughter in that woman's eyes. I was killing the father of that boy with the plastic truck. I was taking an eraser to that drawing and wiping it out of existence. I was creating a silence that would never, ever be filled. I sat there for a long time. The dust settled around me. The light from the window moved across the floor as the sun dipped lower. The shadows stretched out, reaching for me. I felt like an intruder in the worst possible way. I had violated a sacred space. I had looked into another man's soul without his permission. My hand shook as I reached up. I wanted to take the photo. I don't know why. Maybe to save it. Maybe to punish myself. Maybe to carry the weight of it. But I stopped. I couldn't touch it. It wasn't mine. It belonged to the ghost. I slowly stood up. My joints popped. The sound was too loud. I felt old. I felt heavy. I felt like I was carrying the entire war on my shoulders. I reached out and gently pushed the metal door closed. I didn't slam it. I closed it with the same care I would use to close the door on my sleeping son. Click. The latch caught. The sanctuary was sealed again. I didn't search the rest of the room. I didn't check under the mattress. I didn't look for maps. I turned around and walked out of that room. I walked down the hall, back through the dust, back out into the blinding sunlight where my squad was waiting. "Anything in there?" my sergeant asked. He was chewing gum, looking bored, scanning the horizon. I looked at him. I looked at the guys. They were joking around, smoking cigarettes, kicking rocks. They were good men, brave men, but they hadn't seen the locker. "No," I said. My voice was raspy. I had to clear my throat. "Nothing. Just empty rooms. Just dust." He nodded. "All right. Let's move out. We're burning daylight." We moved out, we left the compound, we went on to the next grid coordinate, the next mission, the next fight. But I never really left that room. That was 10 years ago. I'm back home now. I'm a civilian. I work in logistics, I drive a truck, I pay my taxes, I mow my lawn on Saturdays. But the silence followed me. It sits with me at the dinner table. It rides in the passenger seat of my truck. Sometimes I'll be at the grocery store. I'll be standing in the cereal aisle, looking at the colorful boxes surrounded by normal people living normal lives, and suddenly the air will get heavy. The sounds of the store will fade away, and I'm back there. I'm back in front of that gray locker. I wonder where he is. I wonder if he made it back to the woman with the laugh. I wonder if he ever got to hug the boy with the plastic truck. I wonder if he opened that locker, packed his bag, and went home to a life of peace. Or, I wonder if his locker was cleaned out by a stranger. I wonder if his wife got a folded flag and a box of personal effects. I wonder if that drawing ended up in a trash can on a base somewhere, discarded as non-essential. I'll never know. That's the burden. You never get to know the end of the story. You just get the fragments, the moments that break you. I think about him every time I look at my own son. Every time I hug my wife, I hold them a little tighter. I linger a little longer. Because I know how fragile it is. I know that somewhere on the other side of the world there is another man holding his family tight, terrified of the day he has to leave them behind. We weren't enemies. Not really. We were just two fathers, standing on opposite sides of a line drawn by men who never had to clear a room. We were just two men trying to protect the pictures taped to the inside of our lockers. He carried a rifle. I carried a rifle. He had a prayer book. I had a Bible. He had a drawing. I had a photo. We were mirrors. And when I broke down in that room, it wasn't because I was weak. It was because, for the first time, I saw my own reflection. I carry him with me. I don't know his name. I don't know his face. But I carry him. Every Veterans Day, when people thank me for my service, I nod. I say thank you. But inside, I'm not thinking about the medals. I'm not thinking about the victories. I'm thinking about a gray metal locker in a dusty room. And I'm saying a quiet prayer for the enemy who taught me how to be human again. If you are carrying something today, something heavy that nobody else can see, I want you to know that you don't have to carry it alone. We all have our ghosts. We all have our lockers. I need you to do one thing for me. Just one small thing to honor the weight we carry. Don't say good video. Don't tell me I'm a hero. I want to know if you have the guts to open your own locker. What is the name of the ghost you carry? Write the name in the comments. Or if it's too heavy, just type a single period. I'll know what it means. Type it for the soldiers who came home. Type it for the ones who didn't. And type it for the quiet humanity that survives even in the darkest places. I'll be down there reading. Standing watch with you. Dismissed.